stories told over the last weeks have mostly been drawn from the Sufi pantheon of stories. And the questions that have arisen out of those stories have challenged us to bring together our street smarts, our experiences, our intuition, and our oneness. And those questions are related to that wholeness, that place that we arrive at that's called Sat Chit Ananda, when all the three levels of life come together. But there's a question that is now asked, and to answer this question, we have to turn to Zen, because from experience, Zen is no nonsense. It's sharp, it cuts to the chase. The difference between these we'll recognize, but the question that's asked is, what from your experience is the difference between perception and awareness? There are several old Zen stories. The first is a story about the abbot of a Zen monastery who was known for his equanimity, his calmness, being unruffled in any circumstances. But the monks of that monastery decided one day that they would test him. So they took some white sheets and they hid behind one of the columns along the cloister. And when the old abbot was walking along the cloister carrying a cup of hot tea, the monks jumped out from behind the pole to frighten him, ghost-like. And the old abbot was unfazed, not even spilling a drop of the tea. He walked to the end of the cloister, carefully laid the cup of tea down onto a table, and then he fainted. And the second Zen story is the story of Lord Hakyamuni. And Lord Hakyamuni was a great, great samurai master and lord. And he was also a practitioner of Zen. And he decided that he was going to build a temple. But there was a shortage of good abbots at that time, so he had to choose a monk who was suitable to take over this very, very prestigious temple that he had built. So he heard about a certain monk who was residing at a not very well-known monastery somewhere in the boondocks out there. And this monk was lauded for his attributes and his qualities, but Hakyamuni didn't know anything about him, so he thought he'd better test him. So he sent messengers to invite the monk to his residence. And when the monk was led in by the retainer, he was first taken into a reception hall, and then he was taken into an inner chamber, but there was no one there. And then he was pointed to another doorway and invited to enter that doorway. Well, when the monk entered that doorway, there was the great master who jumped out in front of him with his sword above his head, and he said, "What are you going to do? How are you responding to life and death?" And the monk, completely unfazed by it, took his hands and put them on the shoulder of the great master and gave the master a good shake. And Thakumuni was very, very taken aback, and he said, "Don't you know that I could have rent you asunder?" And the monk just looked at him and said, "You are such a foolish man." The third story is a story that's been told several times before, but has never been completed. So to complete this story, it might give us our means of answering the question that's been asked. And it's the story about also a great samurai lord and teacher and master of a school. And he was also a practitioner of Zen, and it came to the time where he had to choose a successor. Now, it was usual that if the samurai lord had a son of standing, that son would take over the lineage, the school. But it so happened that this master had 3 sons, all very adept in the art of the sword. So he decided that he would test them for their worthiness of who would be the one who would take over the mastership of this school. So he had a room, a chamber, in which there was only one entrance, one doorway. And before he called his sons to him, he had arranged a drape, a curtain, placed over the doorway, and above the curtain was a small cushion, placed so that if the drape was moved, the cushion would fall. So after this arrangement was set in place, the Lord sent for one of his sons, and this was his eldest son. His eldest son came up to the doorway and saw the drape and the cushion, removed the cushion, entered the doorway, and replaced the cushion where it had been found. Father and son exchanged a few words, and then the son was sent off, and the second son was called for. Now when the second son entered the doorway, the cushion fell on his head and fell to the floor, but he carefully picked it up and put it where it had been placed. He exchanged a few words with his father and left. And the third son was called. When the third son came to the doorway and moved the drape, the cushion fell, but it had not even reached the ground when he had taken out his sword and sliced the cushion in two before it hit the ground. Now, before, when this story has been told, the question's been asked, which of the sons did the samurai master choose? But to complete that story as it's told, when the great Lord called his 3 sons to him, he congratulated the second son on his progress in the art of the sword. He scolded the third son roundly and told him he was a disgrace to the art of the sword. and he chose the first son as his successor. This is Zen. Sharp, acute, to the point. No need for us to bring together, taking the elements of the stories, the allegories, such as the Sufi stories are, to bring an answer to the question that might have been asked. But this is Zen. So, the answer to our question, what from our experience is the difference between perception and awareness? These stories give us the answer. What is your answer?
I think the first son was aware, and that's why he saw the whole thing before it happens. He knew about the cushion, knew the whole thing. While the third son, he was in perception.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that because it's reactionary perception? Reactionary? You perceive, you act, you react. An awareness?
Yeah, I think there is that, but it's also that perception comes through the senses.
Right on.
Yeah.
Perception is of the senses. And where is awareness from?
Consciousness.
Aren't you aware every minute? Is there any minute now that you can opt out, go into automatic pilot? What is awareness?
Underlies everything, awareness. Without awareness there's no perception either.
Not at all. Not at all. Isn't this Zen? Did we need any machination to come to this realization? Not at all. We didn't have to put the pieces and levels together with our street smarts or our experiences and symbols and then call on the Akashic records to put it all together. Awareness is awareness, isn't it? It's very clear. But what do we do about it? Where does it lead us now? To make this very clear for us. Perception and awareness.
Well, hopefully awareness will take you into the right place where you're meant to be in truth.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Awareness is now.
Awareness is now. Awareness is 360 degrees. Awareness is all-encompassing. Perception is of this.
Find if you're aware that there's no thinking, there's just knowing.
Uh-huh.
And with that right level of awareness, you just know what to do and it's done.
Right.
That's it. Whereas with perception, who knows? You get what you get.
Thank you.